Today on the podcast, we have the pleasure of being joined by Matt Colyer, who is the Director of Product over at Shopify, where he leads the development of Sidekick, which is a really innovative AI-enabled commerce assistant. He's got a background working at companies like Adobe and GitHub. He founded a Y Combinator backed company that was later acquired by GitHub and has done all sorts of exciting things. So we're super excited to chat and talk about what you're working on today. Welcome to the show today, Matt.
Thanks, Jaden. Happy to be here.
So, getting kicked off, you've obviously been working in tech for a while and have done some impressive things, exciting things. Today, you're working over at Shopify on AI, specifically on Sidekick and some of the AI things going on there. What I'd love to ask you a little bit about is, what kind of got Shopify interested in creating Sidekick? What was kind of the role in the market that they were looking to fill? And tell me a little bit about the beginning of that.
Yeah, definitely. As you all know, entrepreneurship is sometimes a challenging journey, and there's lots of different aspects to it. Like, say you're going to go be a merchant selling shoes, got to worry about what are the kind of shoes you want. Then you've got to design your site. Then you've got to figure out what are the creatives you want and how you advertise it and get customers out there. And then it's a lot of extra work beyond just if you really love shoes and you want to connect with your audience. There's so many more other things that you have to do in order to create a great e-commerce brand. And so we envision Sidekick and AI in general as a way to really reduce that toil for merchants and allow more people to participate in e-commerce than would have been able to previously.
Okay, I love that. And I mean, I definitely can relate because I've started Shopify stores. I've worked in the industry and looked at it a lot myself too. And definitely I feel like there's kind of this barrier to entry, or historically has been, where I have a new idea and I'm but then I got to go set up the whole store from scratch. And I just set up this other one. And it just, and so sometimes I'll get around to doing it if I'm the idea is great enough. But sometimes I'm just maybe next time or whatever. And I think reducing that friction, like you mentioned, really does help, because there's tons of people with amazing ideas. They might not be the world's best website creator, but they're a great business creator and a great idea person. And so if you can lower that friction, all of a sudden you have this big unlock of these people that are great at it. So tell me a little bit about what Sidekick can do today that's, kind of changing the game or making this easier for people.
Yeah, Sidekick can do a couple things today. It can help you find help about general e-commerce questions. So say you're what is SEO if you're just starting out, or what is a strategy to increase the number of visitors to my site to better understand advertising. So it can do some really general things. It can help you also find Shopify specific things. Say how do I set up a new shipping partner, or how do I configure taxes for the country that I reside in? So it can help you kind of navigate the interface. The other thing it can help you out with is your online store. So say you want to make your buttons more rounded, or you want to change the color of a header, you can do that. And one of the things I'm most excited about is analytics. So we offer a lot of analytics on the platform today, just in Shopify as itself. But one of the challenges is that if you don't understand or aren't familiar with SQL, it's kind of challenging to extract results from that. And so one of the things that Sidekick's actually fairly good at is asking Sidekick a question how many customers did I have in Texas last week? And it will actually go ahead and write that query for you, and using the power of our platform, get the answer to your question, and then show you turns out you had 3 customers in Texas last week. But you can ask it all sorts of questions, which better helps you analyze where is our store performing? Where could I do better? Did that promotion I run last week really make an impact to my business? And so I'm excited about that because again, it really goes back to that mission of making e-commerce more approachable to folks who maybe wouldn't have been able to do it in the past.
So cool. So cool. I love the analytics aspect. I remember when Sidekick first came out, there was kind of the first announcement by Shopify and looking at, I believe the example was something about it's snowboard season, and they were trying to figure out why the sales were not as popular in the summer. And it was a snowboard shop or whatever. So I love this aspect of it. I think it's obviously really great. Sidekick currently, it's in early access. Correct me if I'm wrong. How have users been responding to it so far? How's this being received?
Yeah, that's right. We're in early access today. So we have thousands of merchants who have access. There's generally great reception. I think people are excited to have that extra help. We really envision Sidekick in the future to be that business partner you wished you had, right? I think one of the other great things about AI in general at the moment is it's non-judgmental. You can ask it any question and it's more than happy to give you the best answer. And so oftentimes I find myself asking that question that it's kind of embarrassing to ask somebody else, be well, what is SEO? And it's you might be embarrassed, be oh, I didn't know what that was, and tell your friend that. But guess what? Psychic doesn't care. Psychic just wants to help you make you better at business.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's actually a huge value add for sure. Asking it stuff that maybe you think you should know or whatever and whatever. So no, I think that's amazing. I'm wondering, how is Sidekick, different from maybe other AI assistants in the market? Is there other players that are trying to do this in e-commerce? Is this like the only one? What makes it, how in terms of like its training, like how does it understand really what's going on? For Shopify and for like all the merchants in there? Give us a little bit of its secret sauce. What makes it so powerful?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really excited about is that Shopify wants to keep merchants on the cutting edge. And so we actually employ like pretty deep ML techniques in order to create Sidekick. One of the things that we do is like we look at past merchant conversations and like try to understand like how we can get better. And one of the other aspects about it is that it can take action with you previewing the output before it actually like saves it. But a lot of the other AI experiences out there in the market today are just like asking for help, and then it's up to you to kind of interpret and do it. So yeah. Sidekick is able to like, you can ask it for help, and then it can actually provide some suggested actions, and then you can actually try those actions and then preview them and then save it. And so it actually unlocks this set of actions that aren't possible in other AI experiences, where like you can just see like, oh, this is how I would do it, but then you actually have to go into the interface and change all that stuff yourself. Sidekick actually is able to interact with our admin experience so that it can fill in forms for you. And then if you're okay with the result, go ahead and save that.
Okay. I love this. I think this is so amazing. I feel like e-commerce and business online is changing a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of really interesting new tools that are kind of helping to unlock this. Mike, I'd be curious, when you're kind of like looking to the future and what this kind of looks like, where do you see Shopify's role in kind of the future of AI? There's people talking about like autonomous agents, and there was just recently a new one, released a few days ago, where essentially it can take over your computer and you're like, hey, I want to start a business about this thing. It's like going and applying for your LLC and like setting up your website. Like, where does Shopify exist in this field? Is Shopify going, and at some point I'm just going to go to the Shopify homepage and say, create a site about this product that kind of looks like this, and it's just going to go and generate the whole thing from like a simple prompt? Like, what does this look like in the future?
Well, I think we want to move from the world of today, which is very much like merchants come in and like have to do step A, step B, step C. I think the whole world is moving kind of away from that model and more towards the model of describing like, hey, Sidekick, or hey, AI, like, this is what I want to do. Like, help me do that thing. And like describe what you want it to be, and then have AI or ML kind of like behind the scenes work to create that for you. So in general, that's kind of where I think things are heading. Can't comment exactly specifically on like, what are we going to do next for like, can you go to our homepage and do that? What you described? I don't know. But I think the general arc is like, we want to capture merchants' imaginations of like where you want to be, and then have the computer work with that, like that vision to get to where you want to be. The other part I would add to it is like, one of the values we hold really important at the moment is that we always want the merchant to approve anything that the AI or ML would suggest. Because like, I think, as you all know, like there are experiences out there where people have gotten kind of like wonky answers or hallucinate something that's not exactly right. And so we are in the early days of this technology, and that will get better. But for the moment, we really trust our merchants' experience and judgment to make that final call. Like, we wouldn't want to go fill out an LLC application for somebody. We want somebody to like, we can suggest answers, but have them actually prove it.
No, I love that. I think that's obviously really important. And I mean, it's not like some unique struggle Shopify would have in particular. This is every AI model. But I would be curious on what steps Shopify is taking specifically to, I guess, mitigate or work on those hallucinations. Or is it more like just putting the disclaimer out there, like, look, we can do so much, but you got to review and make sure everything's legit? I guess, where do you guys kind of sit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to approach these problems in depth, right? Like, you have to make people aware. It's like, hey, this is what the machine is capable of doing. But then we also spend a lot of our product development time in understanding, like, hey, how can we reduce the number of hallucinations here? Like, that might mean selecting a specific model that can handle that and reduce the number of hallucinations in it. It might mean adjusting how our prompts work. It might mean fine-tuning a model to really be able to reduce those cases. So that's something that we're constantly improving. And it's kind of like a tiered effect, right? That like, we have the disclaimer out there, and like with these product improvements, like we think we can kind of manage that going forward.
Okay. Super, super cool. Something I would love to ask you is, looking ahead, what do you think Shopify's kind of long-term vision is for integrating AI across its platform?
Well, it really goes back to helping merchants do what they're best at, right? So we want to be the creative partner, be the business partner there with a merchant. So anytime that there's a product description, if you're looking for some ideas of how you might be able to fill that out, we have a product description generator, right? And so you can actually provide it different sets of tones. Do you want it to be whimsical? Do you want it to be serious? And so we view AI and ML as a way that it works with people. It can help bring creativity into the process. It can help you find things that you're looking for. And so I think ultimately we're going to explore different areas where people can employ that. One of the other features that we're working on at the moment is image generation. So we actually have the ability to replace backgrounds and product images. We've had merchants really use it successfully so far. It's been a real crowd hit. You can imagine these backgrounds, it's exciting to see merchants upload a background of a product in their kitchen, just with their normal stuff behind the scenes, and then transform it into a studio perfect shot with a nice white background and a shadow right behind it. So that's one of the things that's kind of exciting. Some other functions that we're releasing soon is inbox suggestions. So when buyers write in to merchants asking a question like, what's your return policy, or where's my order at, we can help merchants create the response. So based on the data in the store of oh, this order exists, it's been shipped, or no, it hasn't, or here's our typical return policy. And then again, the merchant always has to be in the loop there to make sure that it really responds with their voice. And that's kind of the two that I'm most excited about at the moment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, that one sounds amazing, just being able to have your customers talk it, or, chat in and get these responses. I think another one of the big areas, when you kind of talk about lowering the friction, of course, it's setup of your page, monitoring your page. But then there's kind of the maintenance of, right, you're a successful store and you get a lot of customers with a lot of questions. And that kind of customer service element can be, pretty intensive. And we've seen people finding ways to use AI to automate this. I think that's a fantastic use case for Shopify. Talk to me a little bit about what that actually looks like. Is that going to be if someone's submitting something on the contact us forum on a Shopify site? And then you said there's going to be a human in the loop. So how does that work? Does it come into an inbox and you set up an autoresponder, but you still see it? Or tell me about that process.
Yeah, I can describe it a little bit more. So Shopify Inbox is an app that we provide on our platform. And so it's for users of that app. So you have to be a Shopify merchant, but then also choose to install this app. And that app experience today looks like a list of conversations with the buyers. And then there's kind of a chat interface that exists today where it's a buyer writes in, you can reply just normally any other chat interface. But the addition here is now that in the cases where you ask for a suggestion, it will pre-populate a suggested response. It's based on the merchant's conversations, here's a response that you might want to use. But the merchant has to go in, approve that text, and then actually press enter before it's sent.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So essentially, it's able to generate these, you read them, approve them, send them. Always a human in the loop, but that saves so much time. So I imagine that's a huge benefit. I'm wondering, so there's all these incredible use cases for merchants, essentially, to become more efficient, to lower friction, to sell more, to get better analytics, to get better customer support and stuff. So that's really exciting. Are there any other ways that Shopify is using AI to help make the buyer journey better, or maybe helping with conversions? I mean, obviously, just this whole conversation for customer support is huge. Is there anything else?
What I can tell you is that I'm mainly focused on the merchant kind of experience today. So it's mostly about Psychic and kind of these product improvements. The one other one that I wanted to mention that I forgot to before was around product taxonomy. So one of the other big challenges as merchants is when you're uploading new merchandise, there's a lot of metadata you have to put in there as well. So it's the size of the t-shirts, what material is it made out of? And so with the advances in ML today, we're able to analyze some of the product images that you upload to kind of suggest some of these categories. It's oh, this is a piece of clothing, so it should have a fabric type, and it looks like cotton, so we think that's what it is. So again, most of the experience today is focused on kind of merchant improvements.
Okay, super cool. I mean, this is super exciting. Something that is really interesting that you touched on before that I would love to just double click on is this concept of essentially enhancing your photos that you're uploading of your products, right? So you can make custom backgrounds. You mentioned you have a product and now all of a sudden you make this thing in your kitchen and it's a studio shot. I think this is phenomenal and actually really exciting. a huge barrier to entry, I think, for a lot of people is maybe you have a great product or you have a great idea, but like, going and getting all the professional photos done, especially when you're in the setup phase, like it can be maybe before you've launched or you're profitable. I think for a lot of people that can seem pretty daunting. So this completely, it completely opens up that possibility for people, which I think is really exciting. What are you using for the like the tech or the image generation of that? Is this like a custom model that Shopify's developed? Is it like an API to something else, or like what is kind of generating that background image?
So I'll have to admit, this isn't my area of expertise, but
Okay.
what little I do know, it is custom. So
Yeah.
we do rely on models that are out there. But
Okay.
then we've also got a fair number of iterations on it. Like I think it's one of the things that's challenging about some of these models that are out in the real world is that they present really exciting demos, but then when you get into the point of like analyzing it across thousands of merchant images and like are trying to create like a merchant like e-commerce kind of experience, like that's where we like bring our expertise at Shopify into the fold and like have to make kind of adjustments to the model of like selecting different filters or like training it slightly on a different set of images. So I think that's kind of the unique thing about Shopify ML and AI is that we have the deep ML experience, but then we also bring our perspective of like, oh, well, we know this is typically the way that these shots work best. But it's like lighting from this angle and shadows over here. And so that's kind of like the unique union we're able to provide.
Okay. Yeah. Super cool. And I think that you make a great point, which is like, yeah, there's a ton of these sites that are like, and there's this crazy demo, we do this crazy thing. And then I feel like there's like there's two things that happens frequently. One is just like, and it's going to be available sometime in the next like 6 months. And you're like, oh, come on. Like, OpenAI with their Sora demo. Like, I'm sure it's amazing, but like, if we can't use it, then it's like, I don't even want to know about it. You know what I mean? Or of course, there's the other one, which is like, when you actually try to implement it, it's just incredibly difficult. It's not built for users, whatever. So this is something that I see Shopify excelling at is when you guys launch a product, it's there and it's able to do it very well. I think that's probably a big part of why people appreciate what you guys are doing. I have a question I would love to ask you as far as I guess, and maybe it's like an optics question on this all. So, there's been a bunch of people that have kind of criticized AI text generators because they're like, oh, soon the whole internet's just going to be like AI text generated and it's all going to be like low quality and stuff. I know Shopify has some pretty impressive tools when it comes to creating like product descriptions and FAQs with AI, and Sidekick's able to do like a lot of really interesting things there. I guess what do you say to people that might have that criticism like, oh, is just every Shopify store going to just be like completely AI generated content in the future and it's like low quality or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, do you get that pushback, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of why we've been really intentional about how we roll out AI features is that we don't want that, right? Like we want a quality experience for both merchants and buyers, right? And like I think the creativity that our merchants bring to those e-commerce experiences, like that's part of the reason they're on the platform, right? Like they could choose to be on other platforms where they really can't stand out among other brands, but like the key feature of Shopify is that each store has its own unique persona and brand, and so like we never want to be able to take away from that, right? Like we don't want it to all be cookie cutter. And so like I think that's kind of part of the earlier conversation we were having, Jaden, was around like the idea of like humans and machines working together. I find like one of the most valuable parts of these text-based generators is that it's like creativity. Like I often start like on a new project and then I have this blank sheet of paper in front of me and like I don't know what to write next. And then having something that puts out like a crazy idea, like when the image generators first came out, like I would never have thought about having like a cat riding on a rainbow, like going after a unicorn. But it's like you see that and you're like, oh my gosh, right? I could write like a whole story about this crazy cat riding its unicorn to get to the rainbow, and it would be a great children's book. And so I think that's really where like I think we're still all learning how to do this, but like where I see the most value from LLMs today is around this idea that like help me think outside my box, like break that like writer's block that I have and like get me to that next point. And then that often I'm able to like kind of take it and run with it. Yeah. And then it's great to get feedback. It's like you feed that back in, you're like, okay, now what? Right. And so like I think it's this like interaction between like having the LLM generate something, the people work on it and then come back to it and then keep going. And then you get to the point where you're like, no, I actually think this is pretty good.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great point. And at the end of the day, using a human to really kind of focus on what's being developed is going to be really powerful. So when it comes to, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you talked about Sidekick's ability to analyze what's going on in your store. And there's a couple areas that I think specifically it can help with. One of those is improving sales. I'm curious, maybe if you could give an example to the people listening, maybe people that have Shopify stores or are thinking about opening them up. What is a way using the analytics capabilities of Sidekick that you could help to improve your sales? Maybe give an example of somebody or a store type in a way that this it could help essentially with that.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that we think about internally is like, imagine you're a merchant who sells like apparel that's like, I don't know, like as a fan of a sports team, right? And we all know there's lots of different sports teams. They're usually like kind of based in one specific area. And so like if you're like, maybe you're a big college sports fan and like you're into basketball, and so you've got all these great like kind of products that are for fans and various teams. But you're like not sure what's gonna sell well, right? It's like you can't watch every single game, every single team. Like maybe one team is like really on a tear and makes it into the tournament this year that hasn't made it there, but like you actually had no idea. But like maybe you sit down at your desk and you realize you're like, hey, Sidekick, like, did you notice anything unusual in my sales this weekend? It's like able to say like, well, let me see, like which state had the most like sales last weekend? And it's like, oh, it turns out Ohio had to like, and you're like, well, that's weird. Like I usually only do 10 orders in Ohio. Like why is there 100 orders all of a sudden? And so you start to sit down there and be like, oh, well, like it looks like they're going to go to the tournament. And so like people are really excited about it. And it's like, well, how can we like build on that? Right. And it's like, okay, well, like, hey, Sidekick, like how many customers do I have in Ohio? And Sidekick can be like, oh, well, you have 323 and here are their emails. Right. And you're like, oh, great. Like I've got permission to email these folks. Maybe I should make a discount that's like, hey, like tournament win or something like that as like my discount code. And you're like, great, I'm going to go ahead and create a campaign in my email provider. I'm going to use this discount code that Sidekick helped me create that gives like 10% off. And then I'm only going to market to those folks like in Ohio, right? And so like now it feels like this really personalized experience that like I'm a merchant, like I'm conversing with my community and like doing it in a way that like meets them where they are. And instead of just like in the past, you might have just emailed everybody because like honestly, you didn't really know how did you find the people that are just in one state? And so like there's all sorts of things you can do to evolve that and make it even fancier. But like that's kind of the general use case I talk about is like understanding like purchase patterns, understanding opportunities, like maybe there's an event coming up or maybe like something happened in the world and then like trying to like roll that into like a promotion that really then increases your sales.
I love that. No, that's an amazing example. I mean, I can imagine in that situation too. It's like, oh my gosh, like Ohio's crushing it right now. What's the team that's doing so well? Or what's the area? And then it's like, okay, well, you know, we used to sell t-shirts, but now we're going to like do mugs and like other things. And we're going to like, you don't maybe have the bandwidth to do all those products for every team in the whole United States, but like this one's doing really well. So we're going to put some like extra effort and time into that. Really exciting. Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. So when this podcast drops, it's going to be right after an exciting announcement coming out of Shopify. I guess as we wrap up the episode today, I'd be curious from you what you are most excited about in kind of this coming announcement and kind of what Shopify is working on at the cutting edge right now. What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. I think one of the things being at Shopify is like, it's always incredible to see these like moments every 6 months of like, what have we been working on? And like this one, the one I'm most excited about is that like, we've been really spending a lot of time like understanding like, how do we make the platform more uniform and make sure that like every feature that we have works with every other feature? And like, I think we've really come a long way in the last 6 months of like, kind of like removing some of those like, well, this didn't work with that. And like this, like draft orders didn't work with this and like increasing the number of product variants available. And so like, I'm really excited from like a Shopify perspective that like we've closed a lot of those gaps. I think one of the things that I'm personally really excited about is that like we continue to keep merchants on the cutting edge, right? Like we talked about the image background replacement has been huge. I'm excited about where Sidekick is with the early access merchants that have access to it. I'm excited about the product taxonomy stuff that's announcing today that allows merchants to help with their merchandising, like labeling exactly what's in it. And then I'm really excited about the inbox suggestions that we talked about earlier, like helping merchants respond to buyer questions in a timely manner and making sure that it's really on brand every time. So like there's always tons of stuff going on. I think that's my hit list of what's exciting this time around.
That's amazing. I'm super excited. I guess one quick double click is on the taxonomy thing and helping merchants label it. Tell me a little bit about like what that actually looks like and how what that is and how that helps people.
Yeah. So as you're creating a new product in Shopify, you upload product images. Like we all know, like that's like a really big piece of the buying decision, right? Like buyers want to know, like, what does this thing look like, right? And so the really incredible thing with the technology we have now is like you can ask it like really detailed questions of like, hey, what is in this picture, right? And so like one of the things you have to do as a merchant is like you have to categorize like am I selling a lawnmower? Am I selling like apparel? Am I selling a mug? And the reason that you have to do that is that as you expose it through other channels, whether it be like Facebook or Google, is like they all have taxonomies of like, here's the thing that you're selling, right? And so like by having more accurate descriptions of the product that you're selling, you're able to index it on these other channels in a more like accurate way, which means that like when buyers are like going to these other channels and searching like, I need a soccer ball, it's like, oh, well, like if you're selling a soccer ball, but it's not tagged that, you're never going to show up in those results, right? And so like that's where it's like really increasing your distribution, just like with this very small amount of change. And so the other part that it also helps is like if people are looking for something specific, like I'm looking for a white pair of shoes that are canvas, right? It's like allowing you to connect with your buyers when they have very specific intents. If you don't have that metadata there, you really just can't get your merchandise out there.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much happening. I'm so excited. This is obviously a big moment for e-commerce and for AI. So Shopify really is leading the way in helping merchants stay on the cutting edge, which I think is phenomenal and super exciting. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, sharing your insights and telling us a little bit about what Shopify is working on. If people want to give Shopify a try, where do they go? What's the best place for them to go and find these new AI tools and what you guys are working on?
Yeah, so if you want to give Shopify a try, Shopify.com is your best bet. And if you want to see any of these AI-enabled tools, it's Shopify.com/magic.
Amazing. I'll be leaving links in the show notes for listeners to go check that all out. Thanks so much for coming on the show. To the listener, thanks so much for tuning into the podcast today, and I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.